everybody, Wildman Wes here, and welcome to another edition of Worst State of Movies. You know the drill, folks. Time to get in the whirly bird and go to our next state. We now move on to the outskirts of the Midwest to Kansas. And with the movie in question today, all I can think of is, Dorothy, you're in the wrong movie right now, so take a hike. Today's movie is 1980's Up the Academy. This was a film that was co-produced by Mad Magazine, and it delves into the ideas of the typical teen movie. A lot of teenage angst with puberty and adolescence, whether it's going into high school or college and everything in between. This movie takes place with a bunch of teenagers that are getting into a lot of trouble that get sent off to military academy. Oh, this is gonna be a fun one, I think. The four main boys of this film are the sons of a politician, a possible mobster, a Middle Eastern oil tycoon, and a minister. So you can get an idea where all these kids from different lays of land come together and get into a lot of hijinks. While they go to this military academy, they are introduced to their commanding officer, who is very by the book, make sure that they're not getting into any trouble. Well, that's not always going to happen in comedy movies like this, especially when Mad Magazine is involved. The son of the politician is one of the focal points of this film, mostly because of the fact before he gets sent to military academy, he and his girlfriend are having a little fun and they have a little oopsie, and she has to be sent off to have it taken care of. I have to tread very lightly on why I say having it taken care of, so bear with me, folks. When the politician's son finds out that his girlfriend is going to the female military academy about 50 miles away, he wants to go see her and reconnect and establish their romance once again. He gets the other guys to join him, and in the process of this, they get a new roommate, and there's something a little off about him, and they don't really understand why. But eventually, as the story progresses, you find out that this boy is the nephew of the commanding officer, and he's giving him information on what they're doing with all their hijinks. And while that's going on, there's some of the members of this little group that don't know who's telling who what. So they're pointing fingers and trying to figure it out, and eventually they do. And in the midst of all that, the politician's son meets up with his girlfriend. They concoct a plan to get revenge on the commanding officer and his nephew for all their wrongdoings. And eventually they start to do some great blackmail work, which then commences into the big soccer game between the faculty and the cadets, where if the cadets win, they get whatever blackmail that the commanding officer might have on them, and if the faculty wins, the cadets have to relinquish all blackmail they have on the commanding officer. Well, unfortunately, the cadets lose, but in the process of everything, the commanding officer's barracks explodes with all the evidence against the cadets going up in smoke. The cadets live happily ever after, and that's pretty much the movie. This one was an interesting film, to say the least. It's time to talk about what I like and what I don't like about this film. I'm going to start off with what I like about this film. Yes, the hijinks are very, very hilarious to a degree. However, this movie was made in 1980 and also helped being produced by Mad Magazine. For those of you playing the home game, especially from my generation, Mad Magazine was still very relevant when we were children. And some of the jokes in those magazines were off the wall, outlandish, offensive. And 45 years later, you look back and a lot of these jokes have not really aged well. There's a lot of jokes about teenage pregnancy. There's a lot of jokes that are considered anti-Semitic. There are jokes about a tailor and a dance teacher from the faculty that's very flamboyant. There's also a barber that's blind that cuts people's hair that looks ridiculously out of place. And those are some of those jokes where at first you go, oh, okay, yeah, that's pretty funny. And eventually you go, man, they were out there back then, and man, I feel uncomfortable laughing at this right now. Now, don't get me wrong, I did laugh at some of these outdated jokes, but I think a lot of it had to deal with the initial shock and damage of the 3-laugh purpose, where it's the oh man, I'm going to hell for that. The cast did what they could with their performances, especially with the script being the way it was. 3 names come to mind when I looked at the cast list, and some of them started their careers around this time, and then others still had a little bit of experience prior coming into this. The one that had the experience was Barbara Bach, who was in The Spy Who Loved Me. And I'm a big 007 James Bond fan, especially from the classics. So when I saw her in this movie, I was like, okay, we're gonna get a little bit of that fan service, and we did to a degree, but not as much as what we were expecting. Now, when it comes to the 2 people in the cast that were getting their starting roles, we have Stacey Nelkin, who plays the girlfriend of the politician's son. For those of you that are in the horror fan experience, she was in Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. But the third person that I have to bring up is none other than Daniel San himself, Ralph Macchio, playing the mobster's son. And he does a fairly good job. I was not expecting him to drop as many 4-letter words that because I mean, think about it. Prior to this, I didn't know much about him other than The Outsiders and even the Karate Kid series, and seeing him in something a little bit earlier than the pop culture that we know and love, I sit there going, wow, he actually had a lot of range. And sometimes we take that for granted. So Ralph Macchio, yeah, I tip my hat to you. You're not just a one-trick pony. I never have said that, but if I ever thought it, I'm sorry. Okay, now it's time to talk about what I don't like about this film. When it comes to teen movies, as I mentioned before, so much is involved and invested into these films about plot. And some of the big things is about adolescence and puberty. Also, finding your purpose, finding your place. And not just that, getting a little bit of action when you can. If you look at so many teen movies that we've had in the past, whether it be from Revenge of the Nerds, Porky's, American Pie, Animal House, there's quite a lot going on in those. However, when it comes to this movie being set in 1980, there was one movie in particular that came before it. It was Animal House. And there's a lot of Animal House style humor in this. And because of that, it's, the fact of the matter is, Mad Magazine definitely has that National Lampoon-esque mentality and sense of humor. However, I feel that they delved a little bit too much into National Lampoon territory, especially with the story, because with the character of the commanding officer that's running these guys down to the dirt, it almost feels like a backstory or an origin story of Niedermeyer from Animal House. And there were moments where it really put me off a little bit. It really did. And especially with the hijinks and the antics of how the cadets were going to get their revenge on everyone. It just felt very Animal House-esque. And that's what really bothered me, and not just that, but kind of zoned me out in the process of watching this film. And speaking of that whole National Lampoon Animal House situation, I mentioned the concept of the Niedermeyer character from that movie being almost carbon copied into the commanding officer in Up the Academy. His nephew definitely has, he's a Wish.com Blutarsky. Literally, I just felt like he was just trying to delve into that Belushi Slavic nature of just being gross. And yeah, that really bothered me too. So we're going to move on to this grade. I've done my best of weighing the good and the bad. There are some people in this cast that I really do appreciate. However, there's a lot of things in here that carbon copy a lot of Animal House. And not saying that Animal House is the greatest film of all time, but when you start putting in all these concepts of one movie and making it another movie, you get to this situation where you want to laugh at the imitation as sincerest form of flattery, but this wasn't even a ripoff. This was just too many ideas going at once. And Mad Magazine, I love you. I still own a lot of your issues from back in the day. But when it comes to films, stick to print. I know you're not around anymore, but stick back to the classics and stick with what you know. So that being said, up the Academy. This was tough because I actually did enjoy a few moments, but at the same time, you can only enjoy something so much before you get tired of it. Well, we hope you enjoyed this review on Up the Academy. If you've seen this movie before and you agree with me, leave a thumbs up. And if you don't agree with me, hey, I totally understand. This is one of those movies that's definitely a gut test and definitely a trial of the will to make sure that it's an endurance trial. That's the best way I could describe this. Other than that, make sure you share on social media, push that little red button, and ring the bell for instant notifications. Until then, I'm Wildman Wes, and we will see you next time for Worst State of Movies. Take care.